Hello, everyone. This is Jovonni Christian, the host of The Beginning of the Never Ending. In this chapter, we archive the story of Cameron Akrami. In his origin story as a Polish-Persian entrepreneur, you will hear a man's journey of relentless development. Whether the personal, professional, spiritual, social, even mental challenges, he has carved a life for his wife, 5 children. He owns a company he once worked for 20 years, found God's grace, and most importantly, love for himself. So this chapter, we have an art that's donated by Kaylee. I'll kind of rip it off the wall here. Kaylee, she is also known as my little sister. You can probably tell. But we would like to take a moment to just ask our community to watch this story through its entirety. And if you have found value, please watch future shows on our After Dark channel. We also have a Discord channel. If you would like to join our community, please check out the description below. If you're an artist and would like to donate, a painting, you may potentially be featured on our show. You can message our moderator on Discord as well. And if you want to watch our show live, we host it every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So please join our chat, get involved, and you never know, you might be invited to the show. So thank you again for all the support. And without further ado, APU graduate Cameron Mark Akrami. Oh, what's up? Hello, everyone. It's your boy Gio. That's why we do live shows. This is a Beginning of the Never Ending. Welcome to our show where we explore the stories of people, the autobiographies of the life of us, the people we walk by every day, the people we interact with all the time, but we don't really know much about. So I'm really excited for our guest today, Mr. Cameron Mark Akrami. What's up, my friend? How are you doing?
Very well.
Good.
Yeah, excited about our conversation.
Yeah, I'm really excited to jump in this too. For those who may know, okay, Sarah, do you remember the episode? I think it was episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Episode 10. Your wife was joining us.
Yeah.
And so I already got to know a lot about her, and she speaks very highly of you. So I'm really excited to kind of explore to how you guys have gotten together and how you created just like a lot of wonder for the world, especially how much you influence. I mean, Miss Akrami has influenced my life as well. So without further ado, let's start from the beginning, huh? Where does it begin? Where's the, do you know much about your ancestors or a little bit more about like kind of your, just like your upbringing, where they come from? And then also, Sarah, do you mind doing me a quick favor? Do you mind cutting off one of those slides? Just the top, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so my family origins are from 2 different continents.
Okay.
So my dad is from Iran.
Whoa.
And just for as long back as we know, that would never change. So fully Persian. And I don't know much about my relatives on that side, other than I found some picture that's like my great grandparents, both of them. And so that was really cool to see recently, and it's totally looks like something out of a storybook.
Yeah.
Living in the desert, not in mud huts or anything like that. I mean, Persian civilization has been around for thousands of years in some form, but there's that. And then on the other side, I'm Polish-Ukrainian. So my mom is half Polish, half Ukrainian, and my great-grandpa on my mom's side was a renowned Ukrainian poet. There's like a museum in Kiev that is based around his writings back in the early 20th century. So
Yo, that's wild.
it's pretty crazy. So that's the little bit that I know about my heritage as far as where they've come from. But both my parents were functionally immigrants. My dad, fully an immigrant, moved here straight from Iran back in the mid-'70s.
I heard there was a big war that was happening during that time, right? Or a civil unrest, right? But they were trying to overthrow politicians. I'm not sure.
Yeah, there was a revolution over there. So it used to be really westernized with a lot of general freedoms. It was pretty advanced.
Right.
And in the late 70s, after my dad was already here, there was an Islamic revolution.
Oh, so he got here before that.
Yeah.
Oh, thank God, yeah.
He was kind of a rabble rouser even when he was there. And so the Shah of Iran at that time and his kind of there was some persecution or just some heavy-handedness that my dad was kind of fleeing from as well.
Sure.
but he wasn't swept up in the Islamic Revolution. And it's weird because I see pictures of my relatives from the 70s and before, and they look like Westerners. They look like they could be in Los Angeles at the beach. And now, because it's the Islamic Republic of Iran, and now they're dressed not head to toe, but they have to have their heads covered, and it's a theocracy at this point.
So I'm curious if you mind me pausing just here. I'm gonna live here for just a second.
Yeah.
Did you ever get to meet your grandparents or from your father's side?
Yeah. So they came and stayed with us a couple of times for months at a time.
Okay.
And so my grandpa and grandma came and stayed. And then my grandpa had some heart attacks and a stroke in the early 90s. And so I was 11 years old. And we went to Iran and we were there for a month. So
how old were you, do you mind me asking?
11.
Oh, okay. So you were fairly young.
Pretty young, yeah.
Do you remember much about him, his character, his personality?
Yeah, my grandpa was really mild-mannered.
Okay.
There's a funny story. So they came and stayed here. So my grandpa would walk me to third grade. My brother, who was in first grade, and he'd walk us to school and walk us back. And he had a soft spot for us. My dad was like, listen, he'd tell my grandpa, don't give them any money. There's a 7-Eleven there. Don't do anything. But we'd butter him up and we'd get in front of there on the way home.
Love it.
And my dad suspected something. And so one time he parked across the street and he saw my grandpa. He watched this whole thing happen where we kind of held our hands out. My grandpa gave us some money. And we went in. My brother's playing video games, Ninja Gaiden or something like that.
Yo.
I'm getting some candy. And all of a sudden I just feel this presence right here. And I just look up and it's my dad. And I just throw the peanut butter cups back in. He says, you could buy them. I'm like, I don't want them. My brother, poor guy, he couldn't even see. He was so tiny.
That's awesome.
And my dad just appeared and he forgot he was even playing a video game.
There's something special about grandparents, especially from what I've heard from Iranian culture. They tend to have a really, really the kids. They really, really care about their kids. Family
in general is super important. Everybody's living multi-generationally.
Yeah.
So that was really strong upbringing. My dad was here. I speak Persian.
Oh, okay.
And
so sorry. So it's Persian. I should. Is the right terminology? I don't want to be rude.
Yeah, I guess if you're in Iran, you call it Farsi.
Oh, okay.
But I guess the right way to say it when you're not in Iran is to call it Persian.
Okay. And your grandmother, and was she just the same, pretty mild-mannered? And
yeah.
Okay. They're
both pretty mild-mannered, warm. It's a really warm culture. Everybody hugs and kisses each other on the cheek. The guys also, which is really unsettling if you get anybody, a Westerner over there. They're like, what's going on here? I just want a firm handshake.
Yeah.
So it's a handshake and a couple of kisses.
Some love there.
It's really great, and the food's amazing too.
So I'm really curious. Is the Polish Ukrainians, are they tend to be the same type of personality?
It's not like that, but it's also really festive, and for being European, Eastern European, it's still a really warm and friendly culture. Yeah, it's not Germanic in the sense of very rigid and firm. It's pretty warm as well.
And did you get to meet them as well?
My grandma, I did. My grandfather passed away in Poland when my mom was 9. That was kind of an interesting thing, though. So when I say my mom is Polish-Ukrainian, she actually was born in the U.S. And moved to Poland when she was 9 years old because her dad was a trucker here and he got deported for un-American activities. It was during the communist issues, and so she ended up moving to Poland, and then within a year or so of them being there a couple of years, he passed away. So I never met him, but we traveled to Poland a couple of times. My mom lived there for 17 years, I think, got her master's degree in nursing, and then moved back to the States in the mid-'70s and worked as a nurse in Reno.
You said you met your grandmother.
Yeah.
Can you kind of describe her to me?
She was really quiet, small, maybe 5 feet tall, and I'm 6'1", so I'm just tower over Grandma Olga Grezalewski.
Olga, I love it.
Yeah, that sounds like a grandma name.
Yeah, it does. That's so true.
Whenever I meet a young person named Olga, I'm thinking.
But I think Olgas are like, woo. You know what I mean? I think you're about to, beat me up. But I feel like she was quiet.
She was quiet and small and pretty private as well. And so when we asked her, I think that's one reason why when a few years ago I had my brother ask her a bunch of questions, just kind of genealogy questions. How did you meet Grandpa? And some of these things. And she was sharing stuff that mom and my uncle had never heard before, and they're leaning in thinking, really, that's how all this went down?
Wow. Well, that's super special then. You said you've been to both of these countries.
Yeah.
This is the ultimate test, you know. Which one do you like more? I know it's hard. You're like,
well, one of them is kind of like perpetually almost going to get in war with the U.S. So,
yeah, right. But I mean, I guess let me do it this way. Do you have a culture that you prefer?
You know, the Persian culture, we were just more enmeshed with it. See, the thing is my dad has passed away. My mom is alive. She's going to watch this, and so I better say that the Polish culture.
It's just bite the bullet. You know? Sometimes you have to. Yeah.
But they're both warm and have stuff. But there's kind of a flair that the Persian culture has. It's gregarious. It's just entertaining. It's a lot of fun to watch and be a part of, and super warm. Again, the food. Look, as far as food goes, sorry, Mom, but Persian food's got you beat.
How did your mom and pops meet? Do you hear that story as well? Because that's totally two different worlds. You know?
Totally. How in the world did those things combine?
Yeah.
So my dad was here as an immigrant in Susanville, California. So he was going to, what was it called? Lassen County Community College. He was on the wrestling team. He was super hairy, and they called him the Persian carpet because he was so hairy. But he was really good. He won championships. And there were some other Persians that he was living with, and they were driving one night. I don't know where they were going, but it was one night, and I don't know exactly who crossed over what, but they had a head-on collision with another car, and my dad was asleep in the back of this Bronco. Nobody had seatbelts on. Everybody in the car died except for him, and he got thrown out of the car and woke up in the hospital.
Whoa.
And so just in an instant, all of his friends' just bodies shattered and died.
Jeez, dude. That changes your whole life.
Yeah.
Was he able to continue wrestling? Was it just that career ending?
Yeah, his career. I mean, he didn't have any lasting things. Thankfully, he didn't hit any parts of the car. He just got thrown clear of it. In fact, he was saying that one of his friends, who was also sleeping in the back of this Bronco, his body hitting the tailgate is what opened it, and my dad kind of flew past him.
This is during the time he's talking about the
70s, mid-70s.
Right? Yeah, so your seatbelts were not a...
They're maybe optional. I don't even know what the situation
Everyone was just jumping in the back of the pickup truck, getting after it. And you said that's how they met? Or
So he got transported to the hospital that my mom was a nurse at. And he was giving his nurses trouble, and I think one of the nurses just wanted to switch with my mom. She's like, this guy is just too much. And so my mom went in there, and I guess my dad just looked at her, and she says, I need you to take your meds now. Okay. What do you got? She had him under a spell. She wasn't trying to, but I guess even in his hospital bed, he was trying to ask her out. And he was incorrigible. So that's how they met.
Wow.
And there are some details too. My mom had recounted this to me, but he asked her out and persisted. And then I think it was just several months later they got married.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, in Reno, and that's where I was born. So it's kind of weird that there was this really crazy tragedy. If that had never happened, I wouldn't be here.
It's like, I always tell people that life, it's like so precious. You really don't know what can happen.
Yeah.
The chances of us being alive, one meteorite away, it's
like, true.
You don't know what, take the wrong road, go the wrong way. Wow, that's astonishing. Right.
Some little decision, if they hadn't gone out that night.
You can go even lower back if they didn't leave and come to America when they did. There's a whole lot of, things like
it's crazy, happen. The intersections of all of the different things. It's just mind-boggling, and then you think of the ripple effects of that.
Oh, yeah.
It's like the whole butterfly effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Some butterfly flapped its wings in Tehran, and next thing you know, my parents are getting together, and here I am.
So was it not so much after they got married that you came along?
Yeah.
Are you the oldest, youngest?
I'm the oldest, yeah. I have a younger brother. He's 2 years younger.
All right. I'm really curious. This is what I'm really, really interested in. Knowing a little bit about your kind of personality and how you are as a father. What is, can you describe your father? Like how your interaction with him and your relationship with him is like?
Yeah, that's really heavy.
Oh, okay.
In some respects, I'm totally fine talking about it.
Sure.
But yeah, it's so interesting. Personality-wise, my dad was super gregarious, bigger than life in a lot of ways, tough. I mean, he was a champion. Wrestler, he was amazing at soccer. He was a soccer goalie. He was always doing physical things, and so that was something that he felt really comfortable in. And he was also super warm. There wasn't anybody that he wouldn't just come up and give a big hug to. I mean, I'm saying Persians do that, but my dad was not cut from the same cloth as most Persians. And it didn't matter who it was. You just had this big warmth. But as a dad, it was interesting. He suffered from anxiety. I didn't know it was anxiety. I just thought my dad was just intense and angry, that he didn't approve. He didn't think that I had what it took. And so he was pretty harsh about stuff. I mean, there's a stereotype with Persians that education is everything. It's kind of Asian in that sense.
Sure.
Where high achieving, you go to school, that's the priority, and then you become an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer. Those are your three options.
Yeah.
Which one do you choose?
It's like,
do you want to eat your peas or your carrots? Those are your options. That wasn't the issue for him, but he understood because he came here with nothing. Few $100.
Yeah.
And worked his way through everything, got a degree in engineering.
He wanted you to seize the life that you have.
To not squander it, because he could see time going, and he knew how precious time was. Because I know that he would have gone back and changed some things. The whole, knowing what you know now, would you go back?
Someone said a rule, I don't know if you ever heard of this story, but essentially don't measure, a kid's like potential with the same yardstick that you measure yourself. Because, the experience that you have, it's a lot of weight you could put on someone's shoulders as they're going through life, and you're just trying to you want the best out of someone, but don't know that maybe what you're asking for is kind of squandering the innocence and of a kind of like a child, a potential that a child could be. Was your mother kind of the opposite side, kind of the yin and yang kind of side of things? In
some respects, she was more of a free spirit. Not anxious and not as intense about that kind of stuff. She would have him back off.
So she was the one who helped put the ice on the
Yeah, in some respects, she exposed us to a lot more culture.
Interesting.
So we would go to a lot of Persian things, and but a lot of it was tied to family. My dad's cousins and aunt were living here, and so we would go see them. On my mom's side, I think the culture, going to museums. She also had more time to be able to do that sort of thing because she worked early in the morning as a nurse. It would be done by the time we were done with school, weekends. My dad was a business owner. He owned gas stations as we were growing up. And so he was there working pretty long hours and on the weekends. So my mom really took up the mantle of exposing us to a lot of the cultural stuff. Also then the Polish stuff. So growing up, I spoke Polish too.
And are you in Reno this entire time?
So we moved to California when I was 6.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, kind of an interesting story here is my dad was a gambling addict.
Oh, whoa.
And he worked in a casino. A lot of people worked in casinos in Reno.
Yo, that's a huge thing.
Yeah.
Vegas wasn't what it was back. No, actually, Elvis was starting to pick up.
Vegas was pretty big back then.
Yeah.
But Reno.
It's nowhere. It's like, yeah.
Reno is like Vegas's, kind of little dorky brother.
Yeah, redheaded stepchild around the corner. I'm just kidding. So you have these two kind of worlds that you kind of are colliding into yourself. You mentioned your early years of that kind of 6 years until you get to kind of like elementary kindergarten and elementary school. What type of personality were you?
To hear my parents say it, I was friendly and interested in doing a lot of different things.
It's hard to remember that far, huh?
I mean, it's hard to have. I don't think you have any self-awareness at that time. So I can remember what I thought of other people, but I don't have a lot of introspection.
I think you're so interested in the world around you, not so much what's going on with you. He's like, I just want to explore.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So playful and not fussy, pretty easygoing.
And when you're going from your kind of like early adolescence, is there a really good connection with you and your brother? You mentioned kind of like he was 2, right? So
2 years younger.
2 years younger, yeah.
Yeah, it was bad news. We played and we fought like crazy.
Oh, whoa.
And he would just I know that I was easygoing because my brother was not. And so he would just get this blind rage. He would just also had kind of an anxiety that would grip him with whatever stuff, and he would internalize it. He didn't have really any coping stuff. And so at home, he'd do fine at school, but then all the pressures of the day would just erupt at home, and he'd just turn blind. And I was way bigger. I still am way bigger than he is. And so, but he would just have this rage, and this little guy, he was short and skinny, and his face would just be contorted and foaming at the mouth.
Right.
It was pretty intense.
Yeah, it seems intense.
So we'd play really well, but then there would be these times where he'd just get overwhelmed and, try to grab some sort of weapon.
He's like, look, chucking something at you, something's coming. You got to keep watch your back here. Were you into like different sports as a kid, or were you like I don't know, is there any like things you really loved to do?
Yeah, sports we did just because it was a family thing. We played soccer.
Got it.
And some little league as well. But I really enjoyed reading.
Ooh.
So I loved reading fiction.
Fiction.
Hardy Boys. I'd go to the library and come back with a stack, and I'd read one of those things a night. So it was pretty books. I joke that I didn't have any friends except for books, and that's what
kept you, the stories. What was it about reading that you liked and enjoyed?
It's just easy to get sucked into this other world and to be able to just picture what's going on and see the interchange between the characters. I don't know. Maybe it's a little bit escapist.
I wrote down escape, but I was gonna ask you. I didn't want to interject here. It didn't seem like you didn't enjoy life, right? It was just more that like there was something really cool about entering someone else's kind of world that they have created. Was it more of like that, or was it a little bit of both?
Well, it's hard because the books I was reading were not dry. They're little tiny mystery books.
Oh, okay, got it.
So even any kind of fiction, I mean, James and the Giant Peach.
Yeah.
You read that, and this whole thing is developing, and what's going to happen, and there's an action to it.
Yeah.
So rather than, there was no TV on demand back then, you couldn't just stream something. So
right.
Books were this kind of predictable way to go through something. But yeah, I don't know. I think reading was, it was just something that even at a really young age, I was a pretty advanced reader. So I don't know what the start of that was, but I knew that I enjoyed reading, and so it's just something that persisted. Even to this day, I really enjoy reading.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's just something that was a childhood friend that you kept with you, huh?
Yeah, he stuck around. I do have some close childhood friends, like a friend from 3rd grade that I'm still friends with.
Yeah.
From 4th grade, who are they're like brothers. So in that sense, it's cool, but it wasn't a very social thing. It was kind of like family. We didn't really have many friends that we hung out with outside of that.
Hey, I'm sorry. I missed where you moved to. Do you mind?
Oh, yeah. We moved to Pasadena. And then I've kind of just moved along the 210 freeway.
I love Pasadena. So is it the same as it is now?
We lived there for like a year
when
we first moved to California, and then we moved to Arcadia.
Oh, so you started... Oh, okay, I see.
So I was in Arcadia for the longest chunk of time in terms of schooling, like 2nd grade, or no, 1st grade, or whatever it was. 1st grade for school through 10th grade, and then we moved to Glendora because the house we were renting in Arcadia was built in the 20s, huge yard, old house, awesome for young guys, young boys. But they tore it down along with the entire lot to build, little McMansions.
You know how it goes.
So we moved to Glendora halfway through high school.
Do you kind of feel like you're going through kind of the elementary school, kind of middle school life? Is this changing who you are, the way you see the world, and how you see yourself? You mentioned when you started going off, you were focused so much on others, right? Did you ever get to a point where you felt like you were really focusing on you?
I think you develop an awareness. You act in a way when you're younger, I think. At least I'm recognizing this with my own kids.
Sure.
Going, in what ways am I similar? And I think that some of the things that I would do to pacify emotions in myself would be turning to food, even as a kid, or trying to find things that I could excel at, and realizing that I also have kind of an anxiety, social anxiety even, and a fear of failure that kind of showed itself over time, where I wouldn't even engage in something because what happens if I really try and it just doesn't work out? Then I'm a failure. And so that's where, again, I'm thinking I'm feeding off the anxiety that my dad had, the expectations. So again, it wasn't that he wanted us to be a certain thing. He was just worried for us. And I think I internalized a lot of that stuff. And
so it was kind of, someone said like the kind of the expectations of weight as you're kind of going through your elementary school days and getting into the middle school days. School seems like a really big like thing in your household. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you ever feel like the teachers were there to kind of really help with that process as well, or was it more of like it's on your own?
It's hard because there's a way. I discovered that I needed boundaries.
Oh, okay.
I needed strong boundaries where a teacher I couldn't out-charm them or outsmart them. And I just had to do what was expected because it was more painful to not do it. And so my 6th grade teacher, Mrs. Teets.
Mrs. Teets.
It's a kind of funny name.
Yeah.
I'm going to bleep it. Is it the
No,
it wasn't spelled the same way. She had one eye.
Whoa.
She had her eye removed because it was cancerous or something. So her eye was shut, one of them. And she just didn't put up with any of my stuff.
She saw through it all.
She's like, I expect you're able to do this and I expect you to do it. And when I wouldn't, she'd hold the line. And at recess, I'd be sitting there writing reminders. And I would also act up in class because anything was more interesting than what I was supposed to be doing. Again, there's this weird fear of failure thing happening too, where, again, if I really try at that and I fail, then I'm a failure. But, well, if I do it at the last second and I fail at it, well, what do you expect?
You did it at the last second.
I mean, how could you do a good job?
It's almost as if you were trying to game like this. I don't want to say yourself, but more of just trying to just make the blow not as hard.
Yeah.
You were scared essentially of trying your full potential and then it not being enough. Do you kind of feel that way, or was it more of like?
I think it is. There's something about people's expectation that puts a pressure, and some people thrive on the expectation. But when you've got a weird internalized thing, like I've just discovered that is the issue with me, I would thrive at doing things that were not expected of me. So I'd have millions of hobbies and I'd get good at a bunch of different things that had nothing to do with anything. But the thing that's required, I would just push off and push off and push off and push off and not start.
That's so relatable to a lot of people. And so I'm curious because one of the things I always found is that sometimes you have people in your life, friends or things of that nature, who support you through your time. Who was kind of like the biggest resource of support? It seems like you were fighting with your brother. Pops was being a little pressure. Mom would actually give you some, was it kind of more of like friends or grandparents or like even teachers? Like, she's like, nope, not giving you.
Yeah.
Who was kind of like the support through your kind of early childhood years up until high school?
I think it was, I had a close friend. I think friends were, and I think that my mom was. It was one of those things where I knew my dad loved me.
Of course.
But I didn't think that he believed in me. And because it was always like my life was just one step away from just being destroyed by myself through my inaction or whatever. And my mom was a lot more encouraging in that sense. Not a cheerleader. My mom's tough.
Sure.
And she grew up in socialist Poland.
Sure.
When there was this whole pandemic and there was no toilet paper, she's like, toilet paper? Like there was not such a thing when I grew up. Newspapers or, whatever you're working out. But so my mom is a tough woman. She has grit.
If she can, ease your father when he gets in a major car accident,
Yeah.
no other nurse could.
Yeah.
For sure, she definitely seems like she has a way of being able to ease someone.
So I think
She has that thing with her.
I think in terms of support, I think my mom, in terms of those that were close, I think my mom probably more so was more encouraging along the way.
So I'm going to ask a little bit of a personal question here. With your mom, were you able to kind of air out some of the grievances or the insecurities or things that, or was it, how sometimes like you look from a far away, or and when I'm saying far away is like as you get older, you're looking back and you start realizing things. But I'm more of talking about like in that moment.
I had no idea.
Okay, you had no idea what you were going through.
Yeah,
Okay.
It was just happening, and I didn't know why or what.
Cool. I didn't know. Some people, I felt like as if they knew the feelings that they had. And I was curious if you had anyone to talk to about that, and maybe someone to console or counsel with about some of the things going on.
I don't think there was that kind of emotional language even available to me.
Got it.
My parents weren't. They would emote. They would just feel stuff, and they would react.
Sure.
But they didn't really have a vocabulary for that sort of thing.
What I think is it's a big part, I hope, is kind of this last, because it's kind of the final stretch, right? Once you get to high school, this is the moment where you're kind of like, all right, new me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Did you entering into high school? This must be in the probably what we're like early 90s. Yeah,
early 90s.
Early
Yeah.
90s. This is a culture is like they're California. This is like, are you still in Arcadia here?
Yeah.
Okay, so what is the like? Are you like a ladies' man now? Like what time? Like it's like what time?
Ladies, man, it's like junior high. You're just on the tail end of junior high, which is the worst time of life.
Sure.
Ever.
Sure.
You don't know who you are. That's where you start becoming aware of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden, you are aware of yourself, and then you think everybody else is obsessed with being aware of you too.
Sure.
And all of the insecurities, and everybody else seems to have it together more than you do.
Right.
You have no basis. It's the most awkward, horrible time.
Right. Yeah.
So high school, in some respects, felt a little bit like a fresh start, but it didn't feel. It was huge. Arcadia High School was huge, like 3,500 students or something being fed by 3 different junior highs. We were the first year of freshmen at Arcadia High School, so it was only a 3-year school before we were there. We were the first 9th graders at Arcadia High.
Yo.
So it was cool though. It felt grown up, and I felt like, really, we may get to it, but college is when
Got it.
college was when it felt like, okay, this makes more sense as life. So high school going into it was really the same friends that I had.
Okay.
There weren't really any inroads. And then halfway through high school is when we moved to Glendora.
You swapped schools too or stayed?
Schools.
Swapped schools.
Yeah, so we finished at Christmas break, and I started after Christmas break at a brand new school.
I want to take a little glimpse before we kind of leave high school. You mentioned that some of your friends were the friends you've been growing up with through, you mentioned like 3rd, even 4th, 6th grade or something. Can you describe them, just some of the cute old friends that you have?
Describe them now?
Yeah, if you don't mind. Or them, then. And
Them then.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like also dorks.
I love it, yo.
We had each other because we had nobody else. You know?
I love it, yeah.
My friend from 3rd grade, we were playing on the playground, and he's way smaller than me, even to this day. And my friend
Ted, okay.
Ted. And so he grabbed like a clump of grass out of the ground with the dirt on it, the roots, and he like put it on my head. I was like, what? And I punched him in the arm. And I guess we just became friends after that. Super random. So we'd just be on the swings together and just going around. Some little hijinks. And and then my other friend, Javad. This is an interesting thing because Javad is also half Persian.
Ooh.
So my parents and his parents knew each other from back in the late 70s or something. I guess I met him I was 9 months old or something. But then we reconnected when they moved to California. Interestingly, into the same house in Pasadena that we were living in when we moved to Pasadena. And so getting to know him and spend time with him, there was a lot of shared cultural experience.
That helps a lot. To connect with someone at least,
And my dad it was an interesting thing. My dad was really restrictive as far as us going to other people's houses, spending the night, forget about it. But at Javad's house, this is my friend Javad, we could spend the night there. And he could spend the night at our house. Because my dad just had a level of trust with his dad. At least culturally. He knew that they weren't going to do all these stupid things. My dad hated The Simpsons. Bart Simpson, he's so disrespectful. He goes, hey, butthead. And he was so upset at that. And he's like, you're never going to watch that show ever.
So you said a term, and I want to make sure I didn't lose that. I did hear you mention it. I said to kind of describe your friends. Did you say geeks, nerds? I didn't hear the term.
They're kind of dorks.
Dorks. Okay.
I don't know.
I was curious. I was asking like are you guys like this is early 90s. We're not getting to the 2000s world. But I think I know like Dungeons and Dragons around this time. Like, were you guys like that type of people, or was it more just like?
No, we just didn't fit in the same stuff. My friend Ted and I. So around that time in high school, we started. He had some older brothers who had done magic.
Oh, okay.
Like just for a fun hobby. So I started doing magic, like as a magician, and we made this little magicians club.
Love it.
And would like put on shows, and that ended up being a really cool thing because I started getting technically good at doing magic tricks.
And that helps you with the kind of social you mentioned. That was a big difference.
Yeah, and it was different. It didn't matter, so that's why I got good at it. You could spend time doing that because hey, look, I'm working on this. Why aren't you doing your homework? Well, I'm busy learning how to do these card tricks.
Right.
So yeah, those friends, I mean, to just really fast forward to them today, I mean, super successful in the sense of accomplished, have found their own ways. They're both self-employed. And one has Javad has a company called Libib, and that's a app where it's like a personal library. You can scan all of the books in your house, and it creates a library. And a lot of other institutions use it now, so that's what he's doing full time. He's the founder of Libib.
That's awesome.
Then my friend Ted is kind of a real estate mogul, building and buying.
The guy who put grass in your head.
The guy who put grass on my head
is now selling grass and land.
Yeah, officially, he's just scaled up. He's putting people on the grass instead of grass on the people now. That's the only difference.
That's awesome. So you're going through high school, and I know obviously this is kind of like experiences. Hopefully, I'm not sure if we had any experience with love at this point, of interacting with people or any close people or that you're interacting with during this time.
Like asking on dates and stuff.
Excuse me. Yes.
That was awkward. I remember going to the junior high dance and being so terrified and going, okay, I have to ask at least one girl to dance.
Sure.
I didn't grow up around any girls.
Oh.
So my couple of friends, none of them had sisters. We didn't hang out on any social things. I mean, not that I never saw a girl in my life, but there just wasn't any social stuff. And we weren't really part of any cultural stuff that lent itself to that. It was kind of just family in a lot of respects. So I didn't know how to navigate any of that space. It was always a really weird and awkward and foreign thing that I didn't quite know how to engage with. I felt like paddling around Lady Island or something and never knowing quite where to land.
Sure. It felt like that in terms of the direction of the kind of core part of your life. You were really good at mastering these small things. But to you, right, it felt like they were not like, to the world we live in now, you can be a magician and make millions of dollars in some weird, like just the way it's structured. But during your time, there was no real such thing of that. You either become the three, right? The doctor, the lawyer, and that's what's kind of essentially respected. Did you kind of feel at this moment where you're kind of now exiting high school, right? You haven't had, you mentioned this kind of like you're still trying to find, not much of yourself, you kind of know who you are, but still trying to find how you fit in within the world.
I don't think I knew who I was, though.
Oh, really?
No, I think it was just something that was being imported, but it wasn't always, there was no real vision for why. So that you don't starve is not a very compelling, I mean, it is compelling, but when you're not starving and you don't feel like you're going to starve, it's hard to say, okay, well, I'm going to go do this really well in school or go to college and get some degree so that I don't starve or so that I have a bunch of money. Okay, well, why? For what purpose?
And no one can answer that.
Well, nobody did. And there was, so I think even in terms of the relationship stuff as far as girls, okay, you're going to date them. Why? Because then someday you're going to get married. Well, why are you there just wasn't much vision or framework or worldview really being imported. It was just kind of a thing that you're getting from your peers or what you're watching on TV. That's kind of informing it, but that's piecemealing all over the place. And so there's kind of this path where culture just has this momentum or this flow that just kind of is always pushing in a certain direction. And so there's a default setting. And so I feel like I was just in a default setting, and you do that just because that's what people do, but that's a really shallow why for something. So
it just didn't sustain, it didn't nourish that the conscientious, the question that you wanted to really know. You just needed that answer.
Yeah, and I don't know that I was asking it, but again, there was no vision being painted. Yeah. There was nothing that was being fleshed out that gave me something to work toward. It was just, okay, do this because that's what you do. So, I think there's also an underlying, it's why, but also
it's kind of like fall into place. Like this is the path, take this path. Okay, but why? Because this is the path, so you take this path. But why? Because this is the path. It's like the answer is never answered.
And they're not even saying do this path. Sometimes it's just implied. That's even worse.
It's assumed.
Because you just find yourself being pushed in a direction. You don't even know to ask the question, well, why? Because if somebody said, hey, you need to date somebody, or let's say it's something that isn't as obvious.
Sure.
You're going to go, okay, well, tell me more about that. What's that about? So, okay, well, you date somebody so that you marry them. Like, what's the original intent, design, purpose of all of this stuff?
Interesting. This is fascinating. So I'm curious now, because college just feels like this is the moment, right? Because college is all about this, and especially during, no more for like the 80s, but in the 90s and 2000s, I imagine like during this time, you could now be able to be outside of your I think it seems like the first time you were able. No, but that's not true, because you've been to other countries. You can go and travel, so you get to see other things. So what was it about college that was really that helped with the final push? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Or I don't know if you even went straight to college. Apologize. What happened after high school? I shouldn't assume.
It was a really high school was really, really tough in the sense of you've got to work towards something, because remember, you're working toward college, so there was this pressure. My parents separated just before my senior year of high school. And so I was doing okay. And I don't know that necessarily exploded my life, because there was a lot of, I was relying more on friends to inform who I was and be a social circle. But I didn't know what I was aiming at. I just knew that you ought to do well on the SAT. You need to get good grades. You need to apply to these schools. So I had a provisional acceptance to UC Riverside, because that was one of the UCs you could potentially get into. I was failing one of my classes, and I was going to have to retake it in summer if I was going to go. But then I also, to get out of class, I took the ASVAB. Do you know what that is? It's like the Armed Services Test or whatever.
Yeah.
Just to get, this is stupid to just get out of class to take something like that. And so I did it. I didn't know how it was scored. I was like, I didn't even finish some of the sections. I guess it's impossible to finish the sections. So I guess I did I had the top score on that. I had a 99, which is the top score on the test. Not the highest that anybody's gotten, but, like that's the maximum that anybody can get. And I'm like, okay, is that good? They're like, yeah, you can choose whatever you want.
Yeah, go wherever
So the Navy was talking about, hey, you can be a nuke. You can be one of these guys who goes in the nuclear program. You can work on a sub or on a aircraft carrier. And there are prospects. I think maybe you would go in as an officer, because there would be some college and training before you get in there. I was that close. If UC Riverside hadn't said, okay, if you take this class during the summer, we'll let you in, I seriously would have been in the Navy.
Whoa.
It didn't, because I was just floating with this way and that way.
You're just literally where the wind takes you almost.
Yeah. So I ended up at Riverside. I didn't take that class in the summer. I showed up on campus. I went in the dorms. They revoked my admission, but I stayed on campus through the quarter. I went to class. I probably worked harder in those classes than I ever had, because I wanted to then come to them and say, well, look, I know I'm not enrolled here, but look how well I did in these classes. Like, sorry, you're out. So I left there.
Wow.
And I went to Pasadena City College. And I ended up going to like 7 or 8 colleges.
Oh, so you really were trying to carve out. Were you working during this time too?
Yeah, on and off. But it was a thing where after Riverside, I just would go to some college and I just wouldn't do the homework. I wouldn't go to class. I'd fail out. I'd just go start over at another one.
Can you, man, this is... it's interesting because
kind of a little nuts.
No, I don't think so. I think there's a, it's like it's again. I have a fascinating thing here. So it's almost like what you should be doing, right? You know what you say. I know that I need to do this, but for some reason, it's just so hard for you to kind of like to follow through. Do you kind of feel like what you said originally from the very beginning? You mentioned that like. I would always do something last minute so I didn't fail. I always knew that do you kind of feel like, I hate to assume, but do you kind of feel like a failure at this kind of like this time of your life? Do you kind of feel like this is like not destined for me or in a way, but didn't want to give up? I don't know how to explain it, but.
Yeah. Again, because there's this inertia, everybody's looking, they go, oh no, is Cameron throwing his life away? So I was doing computer consulting for people as a job, just side job. I was working for this executive search lady part-time. And so doing a bunch of those things, and I was finding that I could excel at those things. But there was a guy actually around that time that I started doing computer consulting for. He was 40 years older than me, Dirk, 10 Grodenhouse. Dirk and his wife Susan. Dirk has passed now, a few years ago, 4 years ago, and I would go over there and just show Dirk how to turn on his computer. He was 60 at that time. And this is how you use Microsoft Word, and this is email, and would just show up every single time. But Dirk had just a spark in his eye. And as a 19-year-old, he says, Cameron, a lot of people need college, but I think you're going to be okay. Like that permission to not have to do it probably was the single biggest pivot in my entire life up until that point. Like he believed in me, and that was something that I'd never experienced to that, hey, I believe in you and I think you're going to do just fine. That to somebody who was floundering around and floating around and feeling like I was just disappointing everybody's expectations and feeling under a microscope, that gave me a freedom and an ability to just be and find what I wanted to do and what mattered to me and what was important.
Wow. Do you feel like, they call them angels, they flow down, was faith ever a big part of your family's life?
No, zero. Yeah, zero. Up until when I was 20, I met Jesus. But up until that point, my dad was from Iran, so he knew the prayers, but it's kind of like Muslim-ish.
Sure.
Culturally, and my mom was Polish, so she was culturally Catholic, and we would go to this Polish Catholic church in Los Angeles, but I didn't understand. I mean, I spoke Polish, but I didn't understand what the priest was talking about, and it was more about the cultural experiences than it was about any type of faith in the reality, not just the religious things, but having a worldview that's actually shaped by, what is the story of reality, actually? That was never a part of our life. That was, the reality was you need to go to school, you need to make money, you need to be not successful in the sense where it's chasing after that, but you need to be okay. That was our religion.
Survive.
Growing up, yeah. And experience things and live a good life and whatever.
Thrive.
Family. So, yeah, up until that point, I think that was an aimlessness, and I think in an interesting thing.
Sorry, how old were you then when he gave you that message?
Oh, I was 20 probably.
Oh, so it was all at that same. It was all at
right in there.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, 20, maybe 21. Yeah, and so I'm just like failing out school after school. Yeah, interestingly, I met Michelle. Not too long after that. It was in 2002. At APU, I was a student there, enrolled, I should say. I wasn't going to class. So I enrolled in the spring. So this was the second semester. I kind of had a 0.827 GPA. Not even a 1.0. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it this time. So the second day, the second day of class, I was walking along at Azusa Pacific University, and I knew Michelle's roommate. And there were these 4 girls there. I'm like, I was interested in girls at this point. I talked to a few by age 21. But I'm walking over there, and later, after I'd met them, Michelle was asking one of her friends, who I guess had a class with, and she I guess was asking her, hey, what's this guy Cameron's story? And her friend's like, oh no, steer clear of him. He showed up to class like 3 times and he never came back. So no, he's just bad news. So that's just kind of an interesting kind of wandering around. But that was around that same time where I was still trying to figure out who I was. So yeah, it was an interesting thing. But my life had changed. My life was different. A couple of years before that, a friend of mine, good friend of mine, still to this day, he shared the good news and life that can be found in Christ. And I was like, what is that? I don't know what that means. I don't have a framework for that. But there was something that resonated. Something was missing. And it wasn't just having some sort of direction, so I know what to do for a career. It's like a bigger story. It's not just the story of like the American dream or whatever, and hope that your money outlives you. It's a bigger story that we're all of us actually a part of. And so him sharing that with me resonated, and I was at a point in my life, but it's kind of a weird thing, and I don't know quite how to explain this, but I said yes to Jesus and received, and it felt like I was made into a new person. Like it felt like life had meaning and purpose where it didn't before. Or at least it made the other stuff seem just, called it out for what it was, shallow. But even at that time, at 20, I felt like I was saying yes to, as much as I was to Jesus, I think I was saying yes to a community of people who also were loving and accepting. That has shifted over time to, it's like, okay, well, even if everybody else fades away. And so it's evolved for me over time with respect to that.
I think that always it does start with community. I'm so curious, why APU? I don't, because it's for those who don't know, it's a Christian college, right?
Yeah.
Why APU? Like, I'm so interested in all the other colleges you've been through. Was there something was it just, who brought that, or did you go to other Christian colleges?
Yeah, I was going to community college when I was hanging out with my friend Brian. He was going to APU. So I was just there on campus, and there's this idea where when there's a supernatural love among people in the church, there's this idea that that's going to be a testimony to people outside of it. And I felt it. There was a difference there. There was a light that was there, and a lightness. And so I think even though there was a couple of serious conversations with my friend Brian that kind of tipped the dominoes, I feel like those dominoes were being set up for a while before that.
But being able to find a community, that was like one of the biggest blessings that you found, and the push to kind of like, yeah, you can join us and you're not going to be judged. There's no huge microscope. It's just, you are who you are. And now we can, move forward together. Let's, the community side was a really big importance.
Well, and I didn't have, but the stuff with my parents, they were divorcing. My relationship with both of them was bad.
Yeah.
So I think I was looking for family.
Yeah.
My brother lived, he's going to school in San Diego. So I think that was part of it too, is trying to find family. And I didn't have that. And so I did find that.
That's a big part of your life as well. Family.
Yeah, it has become a big part of life.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, oh, excuse me. You did something there. I thought you was always kind of around family.
We were around family, but the importance of it never
occurred.
That's a hard one because there was a lot that was caught. So we did a lot of things with family, but there wasn't a lot of maybe talk around family. I take it back, though. I'm just remembering my dad saying, get on the phone with your relatives in Iran. I'm like, I don't even know entirely what they're saying. They're using kind of formal language and but he would make that a real priority. And so I definitely caught some of that. But again, there wasn't an overarching vision. I don't know. I think when the purpose is articulated and when it's clear why you're doing something, other than this is just the right thing to do.
Do you feel like it was okay? I don't want to challenge your worldview, but do you feel like it was more of like a magnet? You were waiting for something to be attracted to. You want to be attracted to family. You felt like everyone was pushing you in directions, but it wasn't something that you felt like, no, I actually want to seek it, or like not just seek it, but I enjoyed and kind of yearned and wanted to be in this kind of. Does that make sense?
I think all of us do.
Okay.
I think we want to be known.
Sure.
We want to be accepted
right.
for who we are. I mean, what better place than a healthy community of people whose primary command to them is to love.
Love, yeah.
Like, I don't mean feel gushy feelings. I'm loving somebody when I confront them, and they're loving me when they're calling something out and going, hey, that thing is really like off base. That's loving your neighbor. Loving your neighbor isn't going, oh, I hope you have fun with that. Hey, you're getting drunk every night, and whatever. Like, how, I'm here for you. Like sometimes you go, listen, this is destructive, but so you're calling out the highs. You're there with them in the lows.
Yo, man. Okay, so this is deep. You mentioned this is the time you kind of met your wife.
Yeah.
How was that kind of relationship because knowing Miss Akrami now, she's very grounded in faith, and it seems like you were now entering it. Was she a help, or did she show you something different from what your parents shown you, your teachers, with your other like what was kind of special about the relationship and how you guys kind of interacted and were together?
I came out of a relationship that was around that same time where it was my first really serious girlfriend over a period of time, and we were involved sexually, and that thing just disintegrated, thankfully, because it was a really codependent thing also, where I was finding a lot of comfort and security there.
Sure. Like
I would with food before, now it was with her and food.
Yeah.
So she moved away, which was a godsend, and around that same time is when I was able to kind of seriously evaluate where I was spiritually. Who was I really? Like, at an identity level, who did God say that I was? So anyway, I had a better grounding of who I was, and so when I met Michelle, it was an interesting thing coming off of that other relationship where I was like, I'm just going to be cool here and just get to know her. And so we were friends. We'd spend time with each other. In fact, we went to this, I need to tell you a really interesting point though. So they would have this chapel at APU where part of the thing of like a discipline or a requirement was that you go to one of the 2 chapels a week or whatever, and they'd have multiple ones to choose from. So I went to her apartment over there and invited her to this evening chapel. We're over there, and she's sitting on this side, and I didn't know her that well. I'd hung out with her maybe one other time for 15 minutes before class or something, if I'm remembering right. But there was this point where I'm talking to this other girl, and I'm talking to Michelle, and almost as close to an audible voice as I can get it, it's like, you're going to marry this girl. And I was like, what? And so I just backed way off of that. I mean, I believe that God will speak to people. That was crazy. I didn't have a framework for that or any sort of thing. And I'm like, what? I just got out of this other relationship. I'm not. And so I remember just thinking, okay, well, first of all, you hear those kinds of things from people and they go, oh, and I just knew from the beginning. And it usually sounds so stupid. So I remember telling my friend, Brian, and I was like, hey, I feel like I heard this from God. And he's like, you didn't tell her that, did you? No, I didn't tell her that. But I wanted to tell somebody just in case. So there's like proof. Let's date it, And then I just kept the relationship with an open hand. And so we got to know each other. We held hands like 4 months into the relationship. And it wasn't about being a prude. Just like having a framework around what is the purpose of sexuality? Like, what is the purpose of that? Is it just for having fun? No, it is for having fun, but it's not just for having fun. And when I don't know, what is a fire for? A fire is to warm you, but if your living room is on fire, it's not good. And so I think in its right place, it's an amazing, amazing thing that does, is incredible. So yeah, it was just an interesting thing. I remember we went to this dance together 3 months into dating or 4 months into dating, in this slow dance. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm dancing with my sister. It was such a strange thing to go, because that just wasn't, we were building a relationship based on a relationship and not just on physicality.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting thing, and that was a contrast to the relationship that I was in before. And so we built a lot of depth.
So being now that kind of your parents are separated, and now that you're kind of building a relationship, what did your family think about kind of her dynamic, and did you able, because obviously you have two really big families, were you able to show her to your father? I know he passed, so I'm not sure if we got that chance to.
Yeah, he passed recently, just like a year ago.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
Excuse me. Okay. Sorry if you lost as well.
Yeah, that's a whole crazy roller coaster. But yeah, he my dad, the anxiety and all that stuff, he was really shrewd though, and he was also he could just tell when people were full of baloney. And if people want to tune into episode 10, you'll get an idea of what Michelle's kind of temperament is like. There's not a lot of guile. She's pretty open, pretty down to earth. And my dad always hated the idea of sneaky people. And there's nothing sneaky about her. And her dad is just like that. And so Yeah, my dad liked her. In fact, there was some point that she remembers that she said something like, "Oh, Cameron, because you work so hard." And my dad, I guess, looked at her and says, "I like you." So bringing her around, I felt really happy about that. But it was kind of weird because when I first started dating her, there were 2 or 3 other girls that just happened to be, they were interested, and I was kind of interested, but I didn't know how to navigate. I'm like, why is anybody interested in me at all? Why is one? And so I was in a band and I had all 3 of them show up at the same show because I'm an idiot. I'm like, what? I didn't think this through. I'm like, I'm just excited our band is playing at this coffee shop. And it occurred to me that all 3 of them were going to be there. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Thankfully, one of them bailed out. But so that was just, but there was just something different with her. It just resonated differently. And I didn't feel like I had to have my guard up with her. I felt like we could just be.
You could be true.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's a dream to feel like you can be as open and so won't hyper nitpick, It feels really good to be able to kind of have the ability to make a mistake and not to be the whole world is going to end, That's a lot of pressure to kind of go through and walk through life, kind of feeling that, Did that kind of feel like how your life was in going kind of through your early years and up until then?
We are pretty different from each other.
Sure.
So you just imagine I'm coming from kind of a loud, confrontational, anxiety-driven family.
Sure.
Where it's tense. And her dynamic, especially I think with her dad, is he's especially relaxed and low-key. They're way more passive. So there are ditches on either side with that.
Sure.
If you never bring something up, there's this idea that peace is in the middle when everything is whole. You can be a peace breaker, but you can also be a peace faker. So you're never willing to bring anything toward the middle where there's actual wholeness. So my family, if we're going to fall into a ditch, is on the peace breaking side.
Right.
Get into fights, but then it kind of can get resolved. And on her end, it was this peace faking thing that's a dynamic in our family. So you get us together, and in a lot of ways,
it was like a dream.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's refreshing until you start hitting some contentious things, and then how you communicate. You're coming at each other in 2 different ways. If she's super passive,
sure,
then I'm communicating really clearly, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, if he's saying that, what else is he thinking?" I'm like, "I said everything I'm thinking."
Got it. So it's like there's still learning to do.
Tons.
I think that I find is cool is that you mentioned that again his name was Ben, right? Did you mention
Dirk?
Dirk. So
the older guy?
Yes.
Yeah.
You mentioned that he told you that, hey, look, you're gonna be okay, and that was a really good moment for you to kind of go on kind of the next journeys of steps through life. As you're kind of going through your journey now of where you've found love, you found faith, right? You found family. You found a family. Where's kind of the occupation? How's that? Were you able to find that love?
Yeah. Some of it was, I kind of fell into it. A friend of mine right out of college, he got a job with a nurse staffing company, Maxim Healthcare, it's called. And usually you have to have a degree to work there. I didn't, but I think there was also a really tight labor market, which helped me. But I asked him, how do you like it? He says, oh, it's great. The pay is really good. There's opportunity for growth. So I went and interviewed. I interviewed well, and they needed somebody, and so I got the job over there. It was really cutthroat. It was kind of like Enterprise Rent-A-Car, but way even more turned up from that. The idea is that you work your tail off, and after a year, you can be managing your own place. But they were hitting some market saturation, and that wasn't coming true for a lot of people. So you're working these crazy hours, tons of pressure. Don't you take a minute off because
you might lose your opportunity.
Yeah, well, we want to know you're serious about this.
Sure.
So I went to the kind of test office I was in. It was a new market they were trying to expand into. That didn't work out as the office is just closed. And I got transferred to another market. And I got kind of foisted onto that manager, and he just didn't see that he didn't think I was providing much value to the office. And so I got let go. That was one of the interesting times where my dad actually did I was living with my dad briefly. I wanted to propose to Michelle. In fact, I had saved up money. I had paid off all my credit card debt, clawed at that, and saved up for a ring. I bought a ring on Sunday, and on Tuesday I got fired. And on Thursday, I was flying up to ask her dad for permission to marry her. So I'm going to show up, ask for his daughter's hand in marriage with no prospects. So I remember coming home, and I was just kind of in the other room. My dad saw something was up with me. He goes, "Hey, what's going on?" And I let him know I got let go. He's like, "Well, it's their loss."
Go Pops.
Go Pops.
Go Pops.
That was a bright point. My dad had an intense love, but it wasn't balanced sometimes.
Sure.
You know, the push your kids, man.
Sure.
Push them. But man, it has to be balanced. You have to be high-fiving them sometimes, proud of you sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, he was kind of didn't know how to do that. But yeah, so I had a few weeks to look for stuff, and there was a place that was a lot closer to we're in Upland, California. And so I interviewed there, and it was just a small office. It had only been there for a year and a half. And I met with the owner, Austin Nwange, African, Nigerian.
Yo!
He's awesome. I love Austin. I have such an affection for Austin. And so he hired me as like kind of a business development guy. And it started out as that. And that was in May of 2004. And I would just accept additional responsibilities. So we were staffing hospitals with temporary nursing staff. And we had a second business kind of baked into the same thing, which was senior care. So we're providing non-medical senior care to elderly. So that way grandma is able to get a little bit of care at home so she doesn't have to go off to a nursing home. And so through just ups and downs of the market and all of these different things, I would take on more and more responsibility. And over the years, Austin would just step back further and further until maybe 2009, 2010. He was kind of just out of the business day to day, and I was just running everything. It was just easier. I was running all of the components of what was going on, hiring. So he was still there in some form, but largely was out of it. And I'm still there. And this last year, our family acquired majority ownership in the hospital staffing business and like half ownership in the home care business. And I'm so happy and excited about that. So in occupation, that's crazy to be somewhere for 19 years.
Equity.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a big deal. A small office that's only been there for a year and a half, you built and run the whole thing to get to where you are now be
We own it.
almost 50%
Of one and majority of the owner of the other.
I mean, my friend, that's crazy. Please tell me. I'm sorry. I have to ask something again, a little personal. When you acquired, was your father still? It was what just right after?
It was. We were in talks. He knew it was going to happen.
Oh, okay, that's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
I've thought about this very thing. You know, you kind of wonder what you wish you would have said before somebody passes. And that was one of those things. Again, the anxiety was like, okay, how's this going to go? Are you sure this is going to work out? You know, there's not some sort of poison pill in it that's going to mess you up. So I was able to share that with him and the process of that. You know, things had changed, though. I worked really hard to repair the relationship with my dad.
Oh, okay.
The emotional language he didn't have, I developed. Once I started to recognize what was going on in myself, I started recognizing similar things in him and going, whoa, I don't think he's actually angry. I think he's scared. Fear does weird stuff to people.
Yeah.
And it can be constricting and just worry. And so instead of me feeling resentful, I was able to have compassion. And again, this idea that love isn't a gushy feeling. Sometimes we butt heads. I mean, there was one point so painful where he had unmet expectations of us coming and hanging out and being present. He thought things were going to go a certain way. And so he told us, he wrote us off. He's like, good luck to you guys. In fact, we were just pregnant with Caleb, our fifth. And I called him and told him, he says, okay, cool. All right, well, good luck. I remember just sobbing in my car. this is somebody I'm wanting to share this with, and I want to matter. I want there to be a connectedness, and I felt so rejected and so broken up over this. Like every guy, I mean, I think every person, but especially a guy wants to hear from their dad, I believe in you.
Yeah.
I'm for you. I'm with you. And I felt like I was being just kicked out because of some poor communication. But the thing that I try to grow in is recognizing the value of humility and ownership. And so shortly after that, I went and knocked on his door and said, hey, can we talk? And saying, listen, I want a relationship with you. Is this what you want? Like, if you could wave a wand, is this your ideal that we just have nothing to do with each other? And if that's the case, if that's not the case and you want something, then we maybe need to tear everything down to the studs and rebuild it where we communicate differently. But I had to ask his forgiveness for a handful of things that were really hurtful to him that I had said over the years that made him feel rejected. You know, there was a time where there was a house on his street that had opened up when we were looking for houses. And I didn't know quite how to respond because I felt pressured or I didn't have good boundaries. So I'm like, what do you think this is, Dad? My big fat Greek wedding where they just buy a house next to each other? But that was really hurtful to him. And I had to apologize and said, Dad, will you forgive me for that? I was clumsy in that and it didn't reflect how I feel about you. Will you forgive me? And being willing to do that, you know, it melted the ice. And a week later, he's at our kids' soccer game. You know, but it took the ability to engage in those difficult conversations over years to, one, know what was going on in me, what the reaction was in me, two, realize that my dad's opinion of me, like I think that God's opinion of me and what he says and who he says that I am actually matters more than anything. More than it, like I'm not the job that I do, I'm not the stuff that I have, and I'm not what people say about me. I'm loved by God, and that's who I am, and nobody can take that from me. So we actually maybe you might have even seen it in our house. It was our breakfast benediction where we it's almost like a mantra where you can even say that even with the kids, because I want them to know it from an identity level. Your crazy job is not, it's part of who you are, but it's not who you are. It's not the truest thing about you. The truest thing about you is that you're loved by God and made for a relationship with him. Everything else is going to come. It's going to go. Relationships will come and they'll go. Jobs, money, stuff, whatever. But you could be on an island by yourself with nothing, and that has not changed.
What's crazy here is that when things start to really look meek, right? You get this, you know, the ring. And you're like, it's time, you know, and then Tuesday it's like, oh wait, it's
the timing was like
Thursday. You're like, oh God, let's do it, you know. You find the opportunity you have now and puts you in a whole different world, you know, and it's really, really cool to see that the hard work that you have put into your, just not only your career, you have learned a lot by managing others, hiring others, training others, talking, I imagine, with your people and you being in-home support services, right? The kind of IHSS, my mother does something around the same lines.
Yeah.
Going to seeing these families, you probably met a lot of people at their last moments.
Yeah.
And I imagine those
the hardest points. Yeah.
Giving you those pieces of wisdom. Mm-hmm. But you're also not only working on kind of like that world, but you have faith and you have church that you're attending to, right? I hate to say religiously, but it is a little bit.
Yeah, consistently, rhythmically.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah.
Right? Habitually. Maybe in a way of building this good habit, right? Of that kind of self-discovery that you're trying to, you know, learn a little bit more about yourself each and every day. You know, you have this new family, especially because of the church side, and you're building new friendships. You're building this kind of healthy relationship with others. And I'm assuming a lot here. I'm filling in some blanks, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things I find really, really curious, and I know a little bit about this story, but I feel like this is a good part to insert this. You not only are having a family kind of with the kind of church side, but you're also building a family of your own. You have a way of now creating your own, I hate to say this too, but society, like your own, not your own, but you and your wife's kind of ideology of like what type of, we've seen the, like, okay, I'm very Miss Akrami's very passive, right? She's not, as at one point in time, wasn't the best with confrontation. We just don't talk about it.
Yeah.
You're, on the other hand, was being very coming from a family that's very, hey, let's talk about it now, all of it now, do it now, right?
Yeah.
Right. But now you guys have the chance to build this kind of family and create it your own, and start having children and start raising a family, start working with them. And I imagine it's still not easy, because how soon after that you guys, whether got engaged or that whole process, how soon after did you guys start having children?
Yeah, so we were married for 5 years. And in retrospect, we should have started sooner and had more. But yeah, 5 years, again, that's this whole idea that kids just mess your life up. You know that you're supposed to have them, and you know that they're good. You don't not like them. Again, this is this old idea, which I wish I could go back and correct. So if you're listening, just consider what I'm about to say. It does mess your life up. It destroys your life, and it gives you a better one. So you do have to decide that the old way that you did things is just out the window. But you have an opportunity to live into something that's way sweeter, way deeper. The highs are higher than anything else. The lows are really intense. And
so, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm curious here. Can you describe that then? The 5 years of you and your wife, and then kind of the 5-10 years of you and your children. What is different about that kind of before and after? What is the kind of the destruction side? Not the good thing, transformation.
Look, the reason you know my wife is because I thought, okay, well, you've got this debt, and we need to be really conservative about this stuff, and at least pay that off before we, your student loan, before we start having kids, and we have to have some sort of just decent footing. So it was that stuff. It was placing a priority and kind of going along. Again, there was that societal pressure, that a momentum, a stream that we're all of us in, and the stream is just moving along, and we're just floating along with it. And so that's what informed a lot of it. Was we need to make sure that we're paying off the student loans, and you need to at least make your degree count, because our plan was that she would likely be at home with the kids and focus her time on just cultivating and raising them. So I think that's a lot of what was driving that. Why should we wait 5 years? Because we had heard other people waited 5 years. And so that's what we thought was a good idea.
And when you're kind of having children, and you mentioned that also kind of your father kind of dynamic, but you also kind of mentioned that most of your time you spent a lot of it with your mother. Do you kind of feel like your mother helped you a lot with when it comes to the raising of your children currently?
Well, I think something both of my parents gave me with that is a hard-headedness, a determination, and grit. It takes guts to engage and do the principled thing when it's not feeling good to do that. What are you doing when it's 2 a.m. and your baby is screaming in your face? You love them, but you don't know them yet. So I don't know. I think there's a determination and a perseverance that I think I saw in both of them. For them to do what they did, my dad coming here with nothing, building a business he was able to then sell and retire on, and my mom working as a nurse in a bunch of different scenarios, always being asked to be in different leadership positions because she was just willing to do the work and be present. That rubbed off in a really big way. So in that sense, it rubbed off. But I think my parenting style, my mom doesn't take a lot of nonsense. So even though she was softer than my dad, she also would not put up with a lot of baloney and wouldn't go along with kind of the standard American soft thing. She's Eastern European culturally. And so that's definitely part of who she is. And I think that has influenced how I parent. It's given me a license in some ways to be a little harder. I figure if my kids' lives right now are hard, if I can make it hard, not painful,
Sure.
hard.
Sure.
If I can make their life hard now, then it'll be easier later. But if I make it easy now, it's going to be hard for them later because those muscles are not going to be developed. I play a guitar, their fingers aren't going to be calloused. Everything's going to be painful later.
Is it similar to this saying, right? Hard times create. Do you know the saying?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so I don't know if the
hard times create strong men create good times create weak men create hard times.
I think you're spot on trying to make sure you set up an environment that's not unbearable, right? But an environment that is hard to prepare them for the future. Do you feel like the hard upbringing that you had put you in the position you are kind of in today? That's a hard question.
Well, everything, we're the culmination of all of our experiences plus all of our hopes, and we're just trying to figure that out. You know, I think I have a greater vision today. What's propelling me forward is a greater vision for family and fatherhood and parenting and what it means to even be family. Like, we actually have adopted this idea that, well, before God, family is a good thing. Kids are a blessing. And we can do more together than we can individually. So I'm aiming at my great-grandkids. I'm looking and saying, how can I have my kids get their heads switched on and them looking forward so that way they can create an environment of blessing where they've got resources where they can be extravagantly generous and following their passions where we think God is leading them, and not necessarily, I'm just talking also from a financial perspective, not be beholden to necessarily the whims of an employer, where their time is being spoken for, where their everything is spoken for, their time, their energy, and they're having to trade their time for money. Now, they might decide that they want to do something, but I would much rather them be in a position where they can steward income-generating assets and not be beholden to an employer, even if they work hard like mad on their own thing. But there's a different type of thing and a flexibility, and they can live the lives that they want to do, and they're not going to have to compromise because of that.
Do you feel like when you were a kid, right, and the type of personality that you had, do you see that kid in any of your kids?
Yes. Yeah. My son, for sure, super avoidant of work that isn't interesting, where there's a chance of failing, like doing a long project. Super curious about everything, wants to know how everything works. Very just curiosity. When he says something, I'm thinking the same thing. He wants to run off and do something, and I go, I know, bud, exactly why you want to do that, and I kind of want to also. But I just like a little bit of wisdom and maturity and life experience where you go, that doesn't actually end well for you, though.
Sure.
So there's that. But then even like with my daughter, who's a little bit less, she's maybe not in those ways, but we were driving down to San Diego, just she and I had some daughter-dad questions just to try to get her to get to know each other, because she's a little bit more of a closed book. And it was interesting. One of the questions was, in what ways do you see us being similar? I thought, wow, this is crazy. I think we are similar. It doesn't look like it, but at our core level, we're similar because we both of us really kind of try to, at our core, want to avoid discomfort. We like food too much and let it play too big a role in our stuff. And a handful of other things. Those are negative. There are other ones. She's a bookworm. I'm a bookworm.
Sure.
And so other things like that. But yeah, temperamentally, they especially, my two oldest, are very... I even look at pictures of myself when I'm younger or little videos, and I look like my son. Eerily. Just kind of like head on a swivel, paying attention to everything. You kind of take everything in. You don't miss much. And so it's interesting to see that. The other kids, it's not so much. I mean, our youngest...
They're pretty, still trying to discover themselves.
Just temperamentally, my youngest, Caleb, I'm not like him temperamentally at all. He's really quiet, really introspective. He's a thinker. And I mean, I'm a thinker, but I'm a verbal processor too. But he'll just think through things. And our two middle daughters are adopted. So they got none of the genes. They're getting all they're getting all the nurture, but none of the nature from me. On that, so
these friends that you've been growing with, how has that dynamic been over the years?
Oh man,
you acquired some, lose some, gain some type of thing.
I think as I've gotten more focused about the things that matter to me, it's weird how stuff diverges. And I can have, again, a deep affection and a huge love for somebody, but there's just not, I don't want to frame it very negatively, but let's say that there's, you're in a partying crowd, and then you're like, that's not for me, I'm going to be sober. And you go off, it's like, you can love the people that are in that crowd, but there's just like this thing that was very common is just not there to the same degree. And so I think there's that kind of divergence that happens. And so I think people who've been serious about the things that I'm serious about, it's easiest for me to feel like we're running in the same direction. I think that's maybe what it is. It's about running in the same direction, and everybody's going in a certain direction. And so those who are running with you,
it's much easier to stay connected.
Yeah. And there's just, it's connected in a way where I feel energized and encouraged and challenged because they're running a similar thing, and I feel like I can encourage them in a meaningful way. But when you go to I don't want to frame it like this. Maybe it's just different languages. So you're starting to speak different languages, and so you trying to communicate to somebody who doesn't even speak that language. It's just hard. It's just harder. It's a clunkier experience. And that's how it feels with some of the friendships. Again, deep affection, deep love. I love when we see each other. It's like pick up where we left off in a lot of ways. But the day-to-day, I don't know. We're kind of living for different things in some ways.
You mentioned some of them have built, businesses. Some are in the medical field. You also mentioned your brother.
Yeah.
He's in a whole different country.
Yeah.
Did you guys ever feel like you guys got to stop fighting?
We stopped.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he got some he really, once he got in college, he got stuck. I mean, I'm just saying this really kind of flippantly. I hope he watches this. Kevin, watch this because I've got all sorts of things I'm about to share. No, but he had to find and work out in himself. He had to mature, and he had to find. You're in with roommates in college. You can't just blow up like you do with family,
right? Or
whatever. He found, and I'm really proud of him. He's awesome, and I love my brother so deeply. We have such a wonderful relationship now. But part of that was him finding adaptive ways to cope with the stresses of what he was doing. He's a doctor. He sees really intense things. He's an intensive care doctor, infectious disease doctor. So he's seeing really intense situations that are very stressful. And so for him, he'll go surfing and just like fight it out in the ocean. And just, doing Pilates or Tai Chi or some of these other things that have just helped him to just kind of ground himself. I think have helped a whole lot just for him personally and growing and being able to be that. But we have such a shared experience. A lot of that immaturity and that selfishness that we both had, or at least I had, a lot of that stuff has grown up. And so now we have very different worldviews actually, but there's so much in common that we get along really, really well. And I'm really grateful for that, especially having such a tough situation with our dad passing away.
Yeah.
Suddenly, sometimes this stuff can get so contentious. Not in terms of just the stuff, but just in administrating. What do you do? Like our dad, he was living in Panama. We had to fly down there and have his body shipped to Iran. It was there for like 5 weeks. There were all these delays. But I felt like we were working together. And there was no animosity. There was no, I don't know. That's one of those times where the proof is in the pudding. The hardest part of our life, that was the worst day of my life. When my dad passed away. And
it was just out of nowhere. There was no.
It was fairly sudden.
Jeez.
Like Thursday, he called me and said, "Hey, I have a really bad headache." And so I said, "You need to go see a doctor." And I let my brother know. My brother called his girlfriend. It was like, he needs to go to the doctor right away. So Friday, he was in the hospital. They did a scan. He had like a brain bleed, like a mild one that was causing some impairment, like a mild stroke. And then he was going to be discharged on Sunday. And it got pushed, or I guess he was going to be discharged on Monday. But early Monday morning, he like had terrible pain and screamed out, and then he lost consciousness. And they tried to do kind of a heroic surgery, and it didn't resolve itself. And the next day, interestingly, just really tragically, on my brother's birthday, on his 40th birthday, my dad passed away. And so my brother had flown to Panama from Brazil and was there with my dad after he had the surgery and before he passed.
I'm gonna ask one hard question. You mentioned that your pops and your mother met because of a tragic, car accident. It is her kind of reaction to all this. I understand that they were separated, but was she able to kind of like, I don't know how her relationship with you has been, or your brother has been, but is she okay and everything? Like, like her personality in terms of who she is and how everything's been over the last few years. How's kind of that relationship even until now?
It was they would put their differences aside. They would be present at family things. We would do stuff together, but it was strained. And over the last few years, probably more strained than before. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where I've tried to engage her, and she's a little bit private in that sense. Okay. She's really verbal about a lot of things, but when it comes to emotional stuff, so I don't know. It's hard to get a beat even when I ask pretty direct questions. I need to interject something, though, that I think is really important.
Please.
And is, I think, valuable to anybody who's listening, is I did the really painful work with my dad personally. And it was hard for him too, as we worked these differences out. And I loved my dad, and he knew I loved him because I told him so. And I was willing to bring things up and walk through really painful, uncomfortable interactions in order to move from that peace breaking toward peace. And when he died, there was nothing that was left unsaid. I had no regrets. In fact, there was a thing where I had a little opportunity, like I suppose I could have rushed down there. My brother was talking about, well, maybe we'll keep him on until you get here. And I said, listen, there's nothing that I need to say that I haven't already said. I've told him that I loved him, that I appreciate him. I honored him. I've written him some different things. And knowing that I didn't miss an opportunity while he was conscious. I told him when he was unconscious too, but even, when we were together, you never know when that time is going to be gone. And I feel like I would have been chained to him in the grave if I never got to say that and never had the opportunity to make things right with him. And so kind of the challenge, because I have a couple of friends who have strained relationships with their dads or other loved ones. I'm like, listen, don't wait. Do not wait, because I know it's strained. I know it's uncomfortable. But so far as it depends on you, you need to reach out and just honor to what you can honor. And because you didn't show them anything by holding a grudge. When they're gone, that opportunity is gone. So having no regrets in that gave me such immense peace. Even though I lost my dad in the midst of pain, feeling free and feeling so grateful that the way things got left were how they were.
Well, rest in peace.
Yeah.
Man, looking back at your life, excuse me, looking back at your life, you grow up in about a few years of your life in Reno. You come down to Pasadena, go to Arcadia. Your parents, strong families, Persian, Ukrainian, a little bit of Polish in there too.
Yeah.
Such a big family as well. Being able to see different cultures and environments, but strong and stern parents who have strong beliefs and definitely push, and maybe a little bit too much. And you yourself, not only being an individual who's to yourself, but a little bit of a dork, just like wanting to observe the world, wanting to learn about it. Really not so much focused on just like what the world wants you that matters, but focus on things that matters to you, living within the moment, being with part of the flow, interacting with people, right? trying to find the best enjoyment of life. And even growing into like middle school and getting into like high school, like you're making friends, and even your friends are kind of like Persian, half Persian over here. Shout outs to your friend Javad.
Yeah.
You have Ted, and you guys have this little trio that you guys have made doing magicians, in high school doing magician stuff, and your brother is like someone you scrap with all the time.
All the time.
And he kind of makes you feel as if like, no man, you're not gonna let up. And even at kind of like not having the full sense of direction. And not knowing what you want to do, where you want to go, you didn't stop. You didn't quit. You kept trying. Try putting the best foot forward, and trying to find the right home and what you could do. And college wasn't the best thing, but every time you would go, you didn't give up. Right?
I ended up finishing, by the way.
Hey,
bring it here.
Sorry,
I was 34.
I forgot that, bringing up education.
I ended up finishing. I didn't have any of those units. I started again in 2007 when nobody was looking, and started just taking online, because online was just easy because I was working full time, and community college and getting those credits, and then transferred to APU. I ended up graduating from there. I still think it was ended up in reality being kind of a waste.
But it was
an important thing that I wanted to. It was unfinished for me, and that's what I really got out of it more than anything I ever learned.
You're going through college. You meet the love of your life.
Yes.
The person who's able to not just understand you, but make you feel like we could just be friends. It doesn't have to be so. There's no expectations. It's just let's just exist and just to get to know each other and learn a little bit more. And it falls into love, and you fall into faith of you love faith. You find a new family of people. Even though your parents weren't together, even though you weren't near your brother, even though your family's kind of scattered, obviously from different countries. You start building and creating your own family. Yeah, sure, 5 years. It takes some time, okay? And some jobs didn't work out, but there was a few angels that that interact with you, Dirk, and then also Austin.
Yeah.
Being two gentlemen in terms of business, right? Who've really helped give you a sense of direction and help you get closer to understanding what you could do and what your potential could be. And you now have turned essentially that potential with having 6 kids, right? 5, damn it.
Sometimes it feels like 6, depending on the day.
5 kids, a loving wife, a home, a business that you can call your 2 businesses that you say that you built, a brother that you love, your mother, your father, and a culture of a family you have literally taken from your I don't want to get this wrong, but your great grandfather who was a poet.
Yeah.
Of the legacy that you're able to build and the legacy that you're going to continue, looking back at your whole entire life. How do you feel about you? You mentioned you don't have regrets with your father. Do you feel like you would change any of it?
So my friend Javad went down a similar path as far as schools go, similar kind of pressures, and it's kind of a Persian dad thing, I think, just to make sure your kids are always worried about not making it in school. But he kind of meandered around for a while. And I remember, but he ended up doing really well. Got an amazing tech job and all of this stuff before founding Libib. And I remember asking him, saying, I look at my life and I say, I like everything about my life. There's nothing about my life in the stuff that matters. We can always find little, who's somebody ate my ice cream. Okay. But there's nothing that I don't like about my life. And if I'd gone down some other path, if I'd gone into the Navy, my life would have been totally different. Or even if I had got into UC Riverside and stayed there for all 4 years instead of kind of floundering around, my life would have been different. And so I even asked him, I said, how are you supposed to counsel somebody who's 20 and who's in a similar position? We were living kind of irresponsibly. I was living irresponsibly, but it worked out. And so I don't know what to tell someone. What would I tell me if I went back? Maybe I would tell myself like Dirk did. Hey,
maybe,
You've got what it takes. I believe in you. Because I think ultimately the school thing, you can go to college and your brain ends up being almost more scrambled than if you hadn't gone to college. And so I wouldn't change anything. I can't, every step is who's made me who I am today. The experiences, even the lashes on my back that are self-administered because of bad decisions. All of them have a story and they all inform some decision. It's like the old kung fu guy. He's gray, but he's seen those punches coming a million times, and that's how he knows to duck. That's what I'm trying to pass on. Just like my dad wanted me to not have to run into a brick wall. He's trying to tell me, hey, avoid that one. And I'm like, I got to learn this for myself. Oh, man, let me just share with you, son. And I'm hoping that if I balance it, then he also won't run into a brick wall, that he'll go, listen, I can just share with him the way that I ran into one and can get around it. So I don't know. I think that there's nothing that I would change. I wish there wasn't some of the hurt. I mean, I don't know. You don't want there to be pains.
Sure.
But maybe it's this. Maybe it's that they're not wasted. So the pains, they're instructive. They count for something. So, I mean, there's this thing in Scripture where it says God works all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. So it's one of those things where even the pain that you experience, God isn't indifferent to it, but he'll work it together. In other words, it's like it's garbage, but he's got like some sort of recycling program somehow, where he'll somehow work it out in a way that it ends up being a blessing instead of just being pain. It's a pain that produces something that's useful in your life and good in your life and redeeming in your life.
Then I think this question is going to be really appropriate. What's the dream? You are now, we know time, we don't know, right? And there's a legacy that we all want to leave behind. So what's the dream? What are you fighting for? What do you want out of life? If you could put it all on the table, you could give it all you got, and how would you want people to remember you and who you are, and what more do you want to accomplish?
I believe to my core that we're part of a bigger story than we think we are. I believe that we were designed for a relationship with an eternal God, and where we're meant to live in wholeness and peace and acceptance in an absolute sense. We get glimmers of it here. And my desire is that everybody know that. My kids and anybody that they interact with, that every one of them, down through the generations, would know and love God with all that they are, that they would love their neighbor as they love themselves, and stewarding the things that they've been given, that they would be builders, that they would be creators, that they would be cultivators toward building a thriving world, almost in a sense bringing heaven on earth to the degree that they can because of who they are, because they're indwelt with this eternal God. And that's what I want generations from now. And so that's my deepest desire, is that there be something different about us, not because of what we're against or even for, but just because of who we are from an identity, at an identity level, that we live in our fullest identity. Like I will be my truest Cameron as designed, and that my kids will be their truest selves and their grandkids into the unforeseeable future.
Cameron Akrami. That was really impactful for me to hear, and I really appreciate you sharing. Your story is very inspirational, and it's there's a lot of things I've gained off of this, and I can't wait to if you're willing to do another show, I would love to dive into that as well.
Yeah, for sure.
We do have a final segment that we do, and this is where we get to ask you some deep questions. You ready?
Instead of the surface ones we've been talking about, instead of what's the meaning? What's the story of reality? Instead of those lightweight ones.
Yo, low key, I wrote that down. I'm like, that is an amazing question right there. So I'm just gonna shoot them at you. Okay?
Yeah, bring it.
And take long, take short, do whatever you like. So, who have you felt the closest to this year, and why?
I'm gonna answer that based on like the change this year, because I felt the closest to Michelle, but I have felt close to Michelle. So I think I feel the closest to my brother because of the shared experience that we went through, and we also had to work together and balance stuff and negotiate stuff and love each other through a really difficult time with our dad passing.
That will bring people close for sure.
Yeah. Well, it could. It's going to do something. It's not going to do nothing.
What experiences did you have as a child that you wish others could have too? Geez, Sarah, you're good. I would ask one more time. So, what experience? Oh, you got it?
Yeah, I totally got it.
Okay.
There's something unique, again, from an identity level, about living in a multicultural family where there's a strong cultural element. That's a really special thing where I am Persian, not just by ethnicity, but also there's a lot of cultural stuff. And we're not stereotypical Persians. My dad never was, even though he's fresh off the boat or whatever back in the 70s. But I think there's such a richness in being able to experience other ways and other ways of thinking about things that I think is the melting pot thing. I think the U.S. is amazing in the sense of the opportunity that it provides, but there's kind of a moving toward the middle, like an average. And so I think having some pretty strong cultural elements, my mom is so adamant about it. She's so involved in the Polish community still. And in fact, at San Diego, she's like the president of the House of Poland at Balboa Park or whatever. So it's like a cultural experience. So I think I wish that everybody could experience even their own culture and what it would have been like living in those countries, as much of that, the best parts of those cultures, for them to have experienced those things in some sort of way, because it helps to inform who you are. To say, well, where are you from? Well, I'm, Scottish and this. Well, but you don't know anything about that. You've never seen it or experienced it. So yeah, I think the cultural side, I think that was really rich, and I'm grateful for it.
What's one thing you used to love to do as a kid that you no longer do, and why?
What did I love to do as a kid that I don't do? Well, I eat, I read. Oh man.
Used to love to do as a kid, but no longer do, and why?
I even would say like playing tricks. I don't even mean magic tricks. Well, I do with the kids though. Having kids was a rebirth of the whole magic stuff. It's really helpful to know misdirection when you've got little kids.
Who would have thought?
Oh, it's a very useful skill. Yeah, maybe magic. But man, again, as a kid, I feel like I'm still doing some of the things that I did as a kid. So maybe magic. I mean, I was doing it like professionally. I would do gigs and do shows, like stage shows and stuff. So yeah, maybe magic. That was kind of a big part of life, and actually kind of an identity-ish thing where I was known for that. And I'm not as known for it now. It's just kind of for fun. Yeah.
What are you most excited about in life right now?
Family. Family team. Family as a team. Coaching the kids, bringing them alongside, expanding their worldview, exposing them to the world that they're going to be living in for the next 75, 80, 90 years. Like their little slice of their goofball friends is not real life. So exposing them to like coming into, hey, we have to go see a notary. This is what a notary is. This is why we're doing this. Come to the bank with us. They're coming to the office with me, each of them for a few hours every week. just to be there, just to absorb some stuff, sit in on a team meeting. So it's coaching, viewing family as a team where there's tons of love and encouragement, but understanding that they're also being prepared for something. And I wanted, and letting them know that I'm excited to be their dad and spend time with them and do things with them now, but I can't wait to do that with them as an adult. And so kind of creating that and forging that, it's very foreign, but I'm really excited about that.
I saved this question for last. And I'm just going to preface it just a little bit. Knowing how you felt as a child, and going through high school and kind of even a little bit of going through college, when was the last time you felt truly encouraged and supported?
Michelle is really encouraging. Again, so it's like a default, and I'm not even saying that just to give lip service. There's a deep peace, and there's something that's just the depth of the acceptance that's there is really profound. Outside of that, I think the encouragement came through my now business partner, my former boss, now business partner, Austin, where he was excited to venture into this with me. Mm. And he had said if it was just him, he would have closed the thing down years ago. Mm. And here we are 21 years later. I've been there for 19 of it. But to have him say that so vocally, and for other people who meet me say, oh, he's told me so much about you and how he just speaks so highly of you, that esteem has felt really, really good, and it's given me it's buoyed me in a lot of ways.
Thank you. How can people connect with you? How can people find you? Your story is inspiring. So how can people kind of be able to follow you and see your journey and get to know about you and maybe what you and your obviously your business and I know you're just what you have going on?
Yeah, so I mean the main online presence stuff is, so I have a YouTube channel. It's like a gardening channel, The Busy Gardener. We just passed 24,000 subscribers, so I'm stoked. It's not racing ahead like some of my peers in that space are, but it was never about that. It was about sharing something that I'm passionate about, which is also gardening. On Instagram, The Busy Gardeners, and we're going to start creating additional content for Michelle's channel, The Unhurried Farm.
Yeah.
On YouTube specifically, where there'll be longer form things where we talk about some family stuff. So some of these topics are really going to be on The Unhurried Farm more than they will on The Busy Gardener. But I'd love for people to connect with me on there as well.
Yeah, 100%. We're going to be dropping that in the chat and description below. I just want to say thank you to everyone who joined us today and was able to kind of shadow. It was really important. And I think there's a lot of things in this show that I think people can gain for sure. I do want to add something. This is something I haven't done before, but I would like to do with you. And if you have family, whether it be your children or great-grandchildren or great-great-grandchildren, is there a message you would like to share with them if they watch this?
You're loved in a way that's deeper than you will ever understand. And so act like it. Be what you already are. And that's loved.
Thank you, everyone who joined us today. And to everyone, have a great night. Thanks for joining, hopping on. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Peace, love, and happiness, even after death. Good night, guys.